Hello and welcome to another episode of Back in My Day. This week we're looking at 1994 Jim Carrey classic, The Mask.
We'll open fire.
Of course, what can I tell you about The Mask? It's set in the fictional Edge City. It's based on a comic book, so it was a comic book movie before we knew they were cool. It's set around Stanley Ipkiss, a quiet bank clerk who discovers this mask that gives him superpowers. Of course, the main plot of the story is that Stanley discovers that he, through the mask, he can become the person he wants to be. With some traits maybe that he doesn't want to do, but he certainly builds his confidence, and we see that as the story develops. Meanwhile, once Dorian discovers what the mask is, Dorian decides that he wants the mask so he can become this super gangster and take over the whole city. It's a brilliantly comedic and energetic. It's light-hearted. It's full of slapstick humour. It really is full of slapstick humour, and it's fast-paced. It does a brilliant job of blending the real world with the cartoonish effects. And I do think a lot of that has to come down to the fact that Jim Carrey is wearing the mask.
Look at that!
It's exactly 2 seconds before I honk your nose and pull your underwear over your head.
Released in 1994, it really did fit with this growing era of CGI. It was this brilliant sort of almost family comedy, I think is the only way to describe it. I remember being really young, but I remember absolutely loving it and thinking it was brilliant. It does have some sort of tones to it, but what I will say is that I did watch it with my family this weekend, and my 4-year-old has now added it to his playlist as one of his favourite movies. He absolutely adores The Mask. He does want to skip the first sort of 20 minutes of story, but he does love the moments with The Mask. So I'm going to try and track down the animated series for him. Of course, if you've seen the film, you know it's full of catchphrases.
Somebody stop me!
It's one of those films that is just so quotable for those catchphrases. It also introduced the world to Cameron Diaz. This was her first feature film. She went on to obviously have a stellar career, but this was the sort of way she really does sort of introduce herself as the femme fatale, but as the story develops, they give a little bit more sort of development to the character, as it plays really a little bit with the sort of structure of noir films. The film was a huge commercial success. It cost $23 million to make. It made $351 million worldwide. It made it the highest grossing comic book movie versus its budget until 2019 when The Joker came out, which is amazing to think when you've got all of those massive blockbusters, all these Avengers movies, all of these sorts of films. Actually, it was a 1994 comic book adaptation called The Mask that was the significant holder of that title. And as I said before, Ace Ventura, The Mask, and then Dumb and Dumber really made Jim Carrey a massively bankable star.
Hold your lug nuts! It's time for an overhaul!
As for my review, The Mask has its set pieces, and they're the ones you remember. I think about the mechanics. I think about in the alley with the Tommy gun. I'm thinking about these absolutely brilliant scenes that Jim Carrey has just given the opportunity to go, and they blend these CGI relatively well. Even by today's standards, I say it's relatively well. At the time, it was exceptionally well. I could sit here and pick holes in the whole film. I could go through it and I could talk about narrative difficulty and things like that, but actually I just enjoyed the film. I watched it with my children over the weekend, and I've got to say, as I said before, my 4-year-old absolutely adored it. He thinks he loves it, the comic silliness. It captures sort of an innocence in violence as well, the innocence and violence that we got with Tom and Jerry and the Roadrunner cartoons, and it does a really good job of blending that with this sort of real world. Would it have been the same movie if it wasn't for Jim Carrey? Probably not. It's definitely Carrey's ability to mix his own stretchy face with the CGI, and it gives The Mask its true heart. Is it true to the comic? Absolutely not. Is it still funny and mostly unoffensive? Yes. The Mask is slapstick humour at its best. It's Jim Carrey. It's silly. It's funny. And it is available on Amazon Prime if you're in the UK right now. And available to buy and rent in all the other digital places.
That's a spicy meatball!